Salamat Peggy. Good morning. Honorable Professor Emeritus Tan Sri Dato Zulkifli Abdul Razak, Director of the International Islamic University of Malaysia, honorable guests and respected University Management Committee, honorable deans, directors, senior officials and staff of the university, as well as my very dear brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen gathered here this morning. This is a very moving moment for me. I wasn't prepared for this. I'm out of my breaths. The fact that I'm here may have been planned by our karma, blessed by the Prophet and all the divinities that bless our earth. A month and a half ago or so, I had the very special joy of a meeting in Thimphu, a very rare human being in the person of Honorable Professor Tan Sri Dato Zul Razak and Dr. Zulkifli Bharam. And that meeting was followed by a couple of mails that we shared amongst ourselves, which finally eventuated into Professor Tan Sri Zul Razak paving the way for me to come to visit your beautiful country. I believe it's a very special time in Malaysia, truly Asia. You're celebrating your New Year, the 62nd anniversary of the independence of Malaysia, as indeed the auspicious birthday of His Majesty, the King of Malaysia. So on these very happy notes, it's such joy for me to meet all of you this morning. I believe you've just come back from a very enjoyable break. You would rather extend the break than be here this morning to listen to me. However, I'm so glad that I get to meet all of you. This morning, I had a very brief pilgrimage around some of the milestones of this iconic seat of learning. I have a certain vision of a university which is not only a physical space, but a center of learning, a place that lifts the mind and expands the heart and leads the hands to virtuous action. I discovered a place which is nothing less than a garden of knowledge and virtue. How many universities around the world today would have such a motto, leading the way by cultivating knowledge and instilling virtues? We have knowledge all over the world, maybe sometimes more than we need, but divested of virtues. And to the extent that this university, the International Islamic University of Malaysia, has been able to keep its soul in the right place is precisely because you know your priorities, you know your vision. And thank you so much for the fact that Somebody long ago decided that instead of doing any other thing, he would build a temple of learning. That dream translated into the International Islamic University of Malaysia, looked after, nurtured, and guided by all of you. And this university belongs not only to those of you here in Malaysia and the country, but this is for humanity and the world. I'm so glad, I'm so privileged that I get to step on the sacred soil of your university. And thank you so much indeed, Professor Tan Sri Razak, sir. I'd like to pay my tributes to the founders, to the rectors past and present, the university professors, the staff, the management, and the students, young men and women from far and wide. And it is my prayer that your university, and indeed your country, moves from strength to strength with peace, prosperity, and happiness as a daily part of your life. Today, I've been advised as to whether I could share a few reflections on a very important vision that my King, His Majesty Jigme Singh Wangchuk, who we call as the King of Destiny, our fourth King, articulated some 4.5 decades ago. I don't know if you are able to see this image on the screen. In Bhutan, we don't have the sea, so we have to look at the skies. But the sky belongs to all of us. We can all look up to the sky. And up there, this is my imagination of a star. The northern star, the North Star, in other words, the North Star. You have the sea around many of the islands. So this is not something that would be difficult to imagine. Long ago, as you would know, when precision equipment of the type that we have today were not invented, sailors, mariners, lost on the wide open seas, not knowing where to go and where the shore was, looked at the North Star to find the direction to the safety of the port. Today, we live in the 21st century. We have very smart equipment. In the blink of an eye, we can locate the remotest place on the face of this earth. However, our race, the human race, our societies, and our nations continue being in need of this North Star. Just as indeed in our lives, all men, women, and children need a dream, so also societies and nations, and indeed this world, need a North Star. A North Star that will guide them, show them the path forward. So, for Bhutan, His Majesty the Fourth King, Gyalpo Jigme Singh Wangchuk, identified a North Star, and he called this North Star gross national happiness. I have to submit to this very august gathering that His Majesty the King was very young when he had to shoulder the responsibility of running the country. 16 going on 17. Our third king, who we call the father of modern Bhutan, His Majesty Jigme Dorji Wangchuk, passed away, far away from home in Nairobi, Kenya. So overnight, a young prince had to assume the responsibilities of running the country. But even though he was young in body and in limbs, he was a visionary king, a wise, far-sighted king, right from a young age. And he was looking around for ways and means to address the needs of the country, how to take Bhutan forward. At that point in time, in the early 1970s, Bhutan was a very different country. We were still struggling with the basic means of managing our affairs. But as a country, it had to move forward, find its destination. So the young king, literally lost by the sudden demise of his beloved father, was still trying to put things together and take the country forward. And he was looking around the world as well to see as to how other countries brought about their development, what path they followed. He looked around, looked near, and looked far. But he saw that the conventional way in which countries around the world measured progress, development, did not tell the whole story. It told only a part of the story. It told only the story that reflected our physical needs, the physical dimension of life, the material dimension of societies. But life is more than economics. Life is more than materials and commodities. His Majesty the young king wanted a framework which was much more holistic and integrated, and that actually told a fuller story. GDP, a gross domestic product, that most countries, indeed all countries around the world, use to gauge how well they're doing, how fast they're progressing. GDP tells only the partial story, doesn't tell the whole story. And in life, we want to know the whole story. If you're talking about development, we have to think of what makes development, what it is that we call development, societal progress, human development. If we only talk about a unidimensional, economics-based story, this will be only a part of the story. So he was looking for a way that helped to tell a fuller story and a new vision, an alternative vision of progress. And he gave this name, gross national happiness, as opposed to gross national product or gross domestic product. And he believed that gross domestic product is important. We need it. But that is not everything. What is important is gross national happiness. It has been a long time since His Majesty, as a young king, articulated this holistic vision of development for Bhutan. And in between A lot has happened. Much water has gone down the bridge. The world has changed, almost out of recognition. Some of the things that His Majesty, as a young king, articulated seem so prophetic and relevant today, looking at the world from the vantage point of our 21st century. So gross national happiness is more important than gross domestic product. Because the current model, as we know, is economic growth, translating to societal progress and human well-being. Mere growth, we understand, as per the GDP model, economic growth is equated with societal progress or human development. But as I mentioned earlier on, it leaves out quite a lot of things. The current model of growth is based on production and consumption. Production. We can see all around, and I'm sure this is true of Malaysia as well. Production. The moment production goes down, factory owners start getting worried. Revenues are going to reduce. So production and consumption. But if we continue doing or following this path of production and consumption, they're translating into prosperity, there's something wrong with this. So that is why we have to find an alternative to the current production-fueled and consumption-based model. Because the current model believes that the more we have, the better off we are. So having more naturally translates into being better off. But as you can immediately see, there are some flaws with this model. Even Simon Kuznets, who actually gave us the term, this expression, gross domestic product, himself had some doubts about GDP being a reliable measure of development. The welfare of a nation can scarcely be inferred from a measure of national income. Goals for more growth should specify growth for what? What is it, this growth, what is this growth for? Current model does not ask these questions. But the person who introduced the term, Simon Kuznets himself, believed that GDP does not tell the whole story. There was this premier of this province in Canada who was rather puzzled by this GDP theory. Sometimes I think GDP must stand for gross distortion of prosperity, because it provides a misleading picture of our national well-being. So there have been doubts about the reliability of this yardstick called GDP to tell us fuller picture of development. And looking at all these models, this model particularly about GDP around the world, His Majesty the King concluded that Bhutan, as poor as we were then, we are struggling to meet the basic needs. We didn't have the luxury of much choice. But even then, the king felt that we must set our priorities right. So let's take slow, measured steps. Because he had some deep understanding about the nature of our life and our dreams. As a matter of fact, Robert Kennedy himself said, GDP does not register the beauty of poetry, or the strength of our marriages, or the intelligence of our public debates. It measures everything except that which makes life worthwhile. In GDP, poetry, marriages, the quality of our public debates, these do not matter. But in life we know fine art, music, the garden here, the beautiful dresses that we wear, our friendship, our families, love, affection, kindness, trust, integrity, honesty, sincerity, our literature, music, songs, dances, paintings, all these make life, they give so much of joy and happiness to individuals. In GDP, these are not very important. How good is the marriage? How happy is the marriage? That is not important. But is any revenue emanating, growing from that institution or marriage? So anything that does not produce revenue is not relevant for GDP. This old Japanese belief, material things were necessary but subordinate and fell by the ways. There were limits to material resources. It stands to reason, therefore, that material things do not last 1,000 years. So material things are subordinate. They are necessary but subordinate. And if we make material things the end-all and be-all of life, which GDP looks at, there may be some flaws in this argument. That is why in gross national happiness, His Majesty realized that the ultimate goal of human life is the attainment of happiness. I'm sure in this hall, there's nobody who doesn't want to be happy. And in this world, there would be nobody who would not be happy, regardless of time and regardless of place. We all want to be happy on all parallels, on all meridians, from coast to coast, hemisphere to hemisphere, continent to continent, country to country, village to village, home to home, life to life. Every one of us, the human of the species, all human beings, regardless of time and space, want to be happy. This is the fundamental truth about human beings. Therefore, if human beings want to be happy, if the members of the society want to be happy, if the citizens want to be happy, if that is the fundamental truth, it is the responsibility of governments to create conditions whereby people can experience that sense of well-being and happiness. It was also the realization of His Majesty the King that the most profound needs of human beings are not necessarily material or economic. A certain basic level of material well-being is important, but beyond that, there are other things that are also very important. We have many dimensions that make us who we are. We do not have just the material or the economic dimension. We have our social dimension. We are social beings. So how we live in the society, what kind of a member of the society do we become? That's important. We are cultural beings. We have a deep connection with the environment. We are psychological beings. We are spiritual beings. We're emotional, moral, ethical, above all, aesthetic beings. So all these many dimensions are important to give us a sense of meaning and purpose and joy in life. So only cultivating one dimension, the economic or the material dimension, and ignoring the other dimensions would also make life less than happy, less than fulfilled. That's why all these dimensions are important as well. GDP may not be so concerned about these other non-material, non-economic dimensions. He said that human life cannot be limited to an endless cycle of production and consumption. If this was the only goal of life, it would be an extremely limited goal. Production and consumption. Production and consumption. Production and consumption. You can imagine the image of life limited to these two activities. So that cannot be really the goal of life. There is no direct relationship between the level of material success and the experience of well-being. Some people might believe that the more we have, the better off we are, and the happier we are. But the two can often be antithetical to each other. They could be opposed to each other. Some of the most wealthy people may not necessarily be the happiest. So that's why we have to look at these two dimensions rather closely. Therefore, our young king felt that we have to have a much more holistic way to look at societal progress and human development, not only looking at economic prosperity or material development. Therefore, he suggested that gross national happiness is broader, it's a development goal that is environmentally more sensitive. Some 45 years ago, a young king felt that a time would come in the world where there would be environmental challenges. Today, this is what we're facing. Global warming, climate change, natural disasters of all kinds. So, development has got to take care of the environment. If we cut down all the trees, mine all the oceans, reduce everything that is there to an economic factor, there will be nothing left behind for future generations. That's why our development has got to be environmentally sensitive, culturally enlightened. Just looking at the way we began our session in the morning, this is our culture. It's important. Culture speaks to the soul of humans. It addresses us at a level of who we are as a people, who we are as a nation, who we are as a society. How do we articulate our personality as a people and as a society? Where does our identity come from? See? What gives us personality as the citizens of a certain state, see, of a country? See? So culture is important. For Bhutan, located as we are, and the kind of history that we've had, culture is an extremely important element of a sense of confidence and well-being and happiness of Bhutan. So, development has got to be culturally sensitive. Otherwise, in the name of development, so many things could happen, and that could totally destroy our culture. And when the roots are gone, when our foundations are gone, there will be nothing left to stand on. See? That's why culture has to go on. See? Just as indeed it is important to bring in innovation, enterprise, creativity, the expression of the genius of succeeding generations of the citizens is important. But when we look forward, we also must look back to see where we came from. See? So culture, once it is gone, somebody wrote a book, the world is flat. There are not very many genuine, authentic cultures left around the world today. See? This is what gives us a sense of identity. It gives us a sense of who we are. See? It gives us nuance. It gives us point and counterpoint. It gives us a sense of belonging and identity. So culture. So economic development. So GNH is supposed to be economically more responsible. More responsible, economic development has got to be mindful. I may have it, but does my neighbor have it? Do my brothers and sisters have it? Do I only prosper, or do others also prosper? Do we grow together? Do we develop together? What kind of development path do we follow? See? Is it going to be the survival of the fittest? Or do we fit in as many as possible, or all to survive? See? So development has got to be much more sensitive, mindful, thoughtful, and responsible. Then only everybody is going to be on board, see, coming together. Some economically responsible. Otherwise, the rich will go richer, the poor will grow poorer. See. And people-centered. The government has got to be people-centered. Some people-centric governance, citizen-centric governance. What is governance after all? Governance ought to be an instrument of service. So in GNH, we have what is called these 4 pillars. And these 4 pillars I just explained: balanced and equitable socio-economic development. If we can think of GNH as an architect, as a structure, as a house, it has 4 pillars. And the architecture of gross national happiness stands on these 4 pillars of balanced and equitable socio-economic development. Then everybody feels that we're together. Environmental conservation is an important pillar of GNH. And then, of course, cultural preservation and promotion of good governance. These are the 4 pillars on which the architecture of gross national happiness is supposed to stand. These 4 pillars are broken down into what we call domains. And there are 9 domains. The first domain is psychological well-being, standard of living. These are important. Good governance. Health is important. Education is important. Community vitality. Cultural diversity and resilience. Time use. Ecological diversity and resilience. These are GDP is fairly convenient and straightforward, but when you look at GNH, we have to look at not only how physically comfortable people are, good house, good car to travel around, a lot of money in the bank. So physical well-being is important. But all that physical well-being may not give us psychological well-being. So what is the level of psychological well-being? Standard of living, fine. Yes, the basic minimum material comfort we need. Good governance. Around the world today, a lot of unhappiness comes about through bad governance or corrupt governance. So good governance is an extremely important aspect of GNH. I remember we just come back from the university, and His Majesty the King granted us an audience. His Majesty granted an audience to us. There were 5 of us in my group, and there was somebody from the Department of Education who took us for the audience. And His Majesty told us, if at the end of our plan, 5-year plan, if at the end of our 5-year plan, we discover that our people are no happier than they were before, we should know that our plans have failed. Wow. It may be a perfect plan, but if it makes no difference to the well-being of the people, we have to accept the fact that our plans didn't work. So good governance is an act of faith. It's an act of faith. You are there to serve. That's why good governance is an extremely important part of gross national happiness. Health, of course. Health, however happy we may want to be, if our health is not good, we'll always be concerned, not be happy. Education continuously features as a priority national initiative. So education is important, because education, in the real sense of the term, in the true sense of the term, in the sense in which Venerable Tan Sri um, Zirazak read out this morning. Education that is purposeful, that is meaningful, that is properly directed is important. Education not only for careers, but education for character, education for humanization, education for building a good society. Education not only for sharpening our brains and skills, which are important, but education also for building faith and character. Two very important roles of education. Community vitality. For example, in Bhutan, our people live all over the valleys and the hills, on the slopes. Many of them would not have a bank account. But how do they count their wealth? If somebody is sick, the community comes together. I'm sure that is what happens here as well. Whether it is a moment of celebration or a sad moment, whether somebody is building a house or cultivating the land, or there's a ceremony there. So nobody's alone, see. So they count their wealth in terms of the community, that I'm not alone. If there's rain, I'll not be alone. It is not only during sunshine that people come around, see. So if I have any moment of adversity, if I have challenges, I'm not alone. So this gives confidence, a deep psychological reassurance. And this is how people can live together. So community vitality. How do we come together? Do we care for each other? Do we share with each other? Do we feel together? Do we belong together? This is an important element. Cultural diversity and resilience. Culture I talked about earlier on is a very important element. Time use. Time use is very important. And especially today, we do not know how people use times. I see that long, long hours that young people are with their mobile phones. I'm sure it attracts them, it interests them, but what kind of use of time is it? Is it productive? Is it adding to their joy? Is it adding to their purpose of life? Is it giving them a sense of direction? Is it adding to the meaning of their life? And some way in a great hurry, we have to get somewhere, see, as if we have to be in a race. We run, but when we get to the last point, we do not know why we have run. And whatever time we have saved, we do not know how to use that again. So time use. So in Bhutan, we look at whether people are volunteering, whether people spend time in their prayers. When the neighborhood, there is some disaster, are people coming together, see, in celebrations? Do young people go and visit their grandparents, their uncles, their aunts? What kind of circle do they have among themselves? So time use. Do they pray? Do they go for walks? Yes. Do they write? Do they write? Do they read? Do they have time for their families? So time use is extremely important. Sometimes, I failed in it quite, I must say, significantly. It's difficult for many people to set aside time for hobbies, right? For families, for friends, for socializing. See. We're too much into work. See. Work and more work. See. So time use is extremely important. Ecological diversity, resilience. The natural environment is very important. So, as opposed to GDP, GNH is founded on a broader base, more variables. And if we take into account at least these minimum 4 pillars and the 9 domains, we could be fairly confident that we have addressed the major factors that could contribute to a sense of well-being. We could have more factors, or we could have fewer factors or pillars, depending upon the society in which we live. See. We could add more. See. And His Majesty, our current King, Dugyalpum Jigme Gesa Namge Wangchuk, We call him the people's king. Yes, with the people all the time, loving, caring, and encouraging, giving directions, advice. We call him the people's king, His Majesty, our fifth king of the Wangchuck dynasty. And for His Majesty, what is GNH? GNH is development with values. Values, the profound values that guide us in our lives, that direct us, that give us a sense of going forward, values. We may have development, we may have progress, but if they are not inspired by values, you can imagine that we could go haywire. That's why this university is rooted in the tremendous virtues of the human race. Knowledge and virtues. So very important. Knowledge has to keep returning to virtue, to receive energy, to receive blessings, to receive reassurance. Otherwise, if knowledge is divorced from virtue, from wisdom, from goodness, from nobility, knowledge alone could be very tyrannical. Knowledge could be destructive. It could be misused. But knowledge guided by virtue will not go wrong. For young people, for old people like me, for children. So that's why I was so deeply impressed and grateful for the fact that I could come here, read on your wall, imprinted in your hearts, this big message: knowledge with virtue. Development without values will also be very sterile, incomplete, unfulfilling. That's why development with values. And this is a very important guidance for our people. And as Venerable Tansri mentioned, in 2009, we initiated a very important national educational reform initiative. We call it Educating for Gross National Happiness. If a nation has a North Star, if a nation has a big goal, the subsystems of that nation have to participate in that big goals, that big mission. Education in any country in the world is an important subsystem because our future leaders are being prepared there. We collect the most precious segment of the population of the society in our schools, in our colleges, in our universities. The most precious segment of the society, our children, our boys and girls, and our youth, and keep them in our institutions for an extended period of time, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, maybe, if people are doing their PhDs. So, if so many young people at such a most impressionable age are collected in a place of learning, education has got to be purposeful. It's got to be worthwhile. It's got to participate in some big ideas. So we thought that Bhutan's education ministry must do its part to advance, to understand and to advance the country's goal. So we initiated this process called Educating for Gross National Happiness. I'll not go into the details of this program now, but maybe I believe some of us are meeting later. And we have green schools. I'll just explain what I mean by green, what we mean by green. Green is a color, of course, but green is more than a color. Green is a metaphor. Green is a metaphor for anything and everything that supports and sustains life. This is green. In life, in all its multiple variety forms. So, anything and everything that supports and sustains life in its infinite variety, in its multiplicity, that is green. So we can have a green school, we can have a green university, a green home, a green parliament, a green court, green spots, green architecture, green mind, green heart, green actions. Anything that supports life and sustains life in its multiple forms, that is green. Today, our focus in education in many parts of the world is very shallow. See. Education was the only sector that was called the noble sector by the wise ones in the past. The noble sector. No other sector of public service was called the noble sector, but education was. I would like to say education is. Yes. Education was supposed to help young men and women, boys and girls, our scholars, to cultivate the nobility of their mind, to cultivate the nobility of their heart, thereby leading to cultivating the nobility of actions. So when the head and the heart and the hands come together in alignment, then something really, really positive and powerful can emanate. So green schools are a kind of an attempt to address the needs of these very many elements. And also, when I was looking at the walls here, this exactly, or more than this, is happening here. Excuse me. Addressing the whole being, the spiritual dimension, the cultural dimension, the social dimension, the aesthetic dimension, the bigger environmental dimension. I could see the religious, spiritual dimension. All these make us who we are, see. This is who we are. We are not only pupils in the class or scholars, but we are human beings. And we have these dimensions. And in our teaching and learning, these dimensions must be engaged. That's why green school is important in the sense that it does not address just the mind or the intellect. It is supposed to address these vital elements that make us who we are. See. And of course, as I mentioned earlier on, GNH, every nation needs a North Star. So for Bhutan, gross national happiness, as articulated by our visionary king, has been our North Star. How does gross national happiness translate into government policy? I'll just briefly mention these because, all right, you might ask, what do you do in the government? See, so we have what is called a Gross National Happiness Commission. Earlier on, it used to be called the Planning Commission. It does, in a way, the same job. The erstwhile Planning Commission has now been renamed Gross National Happiness Commission. Its job is to mobilize, its job is to do the planning, annual plan, 5-year plan for the country, long-term plans, mobilize resources, allocate resources. But not only that, they have to also monitor how the activities, the programs of the government are in line with the gross national happiness policies. For example, if the ministries or the departments submit an annual plan or a 5-year plan that does not meet the requirements of the 4 pillars, other plans, supportive, a balanced and equitable socio-economic development pillar, do these plans support our environmental conservation priority? Do these plans look after our culture? Do these plans promote good governance? So the Gross National Happiness Commission screens the projects and the proposals sent in by the different branches of the government. And if some of the plans are not compatible with some of these, either of these pillars or the domains I mentioned earlier on about, this GNH Commission will reject. They will not get state funding from the government. So they have to be done again, revised, and once they become compatible with our GNH principles, they could then qualify for state funding. So this is the purpose of this GNH Commission. And of course, the Constitution of Bhutan, we adopted our Constitution in 2008, and the Constitution spells out very clearly that pursuit of gross national happiness will be our national goals. So governments may come and go, but they will not be able to change this policy. And the spiritual organs, we have a very important spiritual branch of the country. In fact, extremely important to provide guidance to our very important aspirations for the country. And we have, of course, we have the CBS. CBS is called the Center for Bhutan Studies. Center for Bhutan Studies is something like a think tank. They carry out a lot of studies and surveys. For example, the Center for Bhutan Studies has carried out, I think, about 3 surveys so far. They carry out a survey after 2 or 3 years. And this survey, they use a lot of these, variables. They look at the 4 pillars, they look at the 9 domains, which are further broken down into 32 indicators or 33 indicators, and further subdivided into 72 indices and still more details. So they use quite an elaborate questionnaire to carry out surveys to see how happy the people are, which district is doing better than which other district, which level of people, old people or young people, employed people or unemployed, housewives or people who work in the offices. So there are a lot of variables, educated, uneducated, spiritual, people working in the spiritual organizations or other people. So we use a lot of these very comprehensive, rather complicated survey to carry out how our people are doing in terms of happiness. So there's also what's called the Gross National Happiness Center. So there are these institutions which also promote ideas of gross national happiness. And of course, the Education Ministry, I mentioned earlier on, Educating for Gross National Happiness and Green Schools. This is the most important and significant player in helping young people imbibe our national vision, because they are going to be our leaders. They'll be our prime ministers. They'll be our ministers, our secretaries, directors, people manning the whole societies. And they have to understand the vision of the countries. They cannot be going their own ways. They have to understand what the country aspires to do. Of course, at the same time, pursuing their dreams and their goals. And how is GNH doing in the world? I'm sure there are many people in Malaysia who would have not only read about or heard about, but also been thinking very deeply about it, or doing research. A lot of universities around the world are actually engaged in doing some study in GNH. And I get surprised when I travel around. Oh, this is your GNH, but we're also doing something to promote it here. Excuse me. So, I don't know, how much time do we have? You must be tired, don't you? I all have. Sorry. Oh, 10 minutes. Thank you so much. As I was saying earlier on, His Majesty, the Fourth King, articulated this very important holistic development vision of gross national happiness. I need to stand. Yes, sir. In the early 1980s. And for some time, many people felt that, oh, it's such a good idea. What a profound philosophy, but it may not be practicable. This is what people felt around the world. Sounded very good, but can it be implemented in reality. And we in Bhutan, we ourselves were trying to understand this profound vision of development, a road that was not traveled. This was a path that was not taken. A revolutionary path in a way. GDP was all right, but here comes an all-encompassing, all-embracing vision, GNH. So we took our own time to understand this. And the world took even longer. But a point came in the life of humanity, in the journey of our world, when the last century was ending and the 21st century was in the horizon. Leaders from around the world met in Seoul, South Korea, in 1999 in this forum, the Asia-Pacific Forum. And it was a very nostalgic time in a way. The past century, it has shown the world so many spectacles, developments, discoveries, inventions in unprecedented fields. The world, humanity had moved forward. With all these developments, with all the progress that humanity had made, that the world had made, there was still a deep sense of something missing. Not everything was right. Where did we go wrong? Did we go wrong at all? What could we do better in the new centuries? So there was this wish. It was a very somber mood, a nostalgic times. Good or bad, that was our century. The new century was coming on, maybe exciting, but we do not know how it's going to be. So, the leaders of the world came together and wanted to look back at the century going by and the new century coming in. And they invited the former Prime Minister of Bhutan, His Excellency Lynchen Jigme Waitinle, to come there as a keynote speaker to speak on Bhutan's vision of development, gross national happiness. And he spoke at this forum, talking about this journey that Bhutan had been on, or wished to be on. By then, the world had become much more attentive. There were listeners. There were more listeners. The world was looking for some new voice, some fresh air, some fresh breath. And they thought that Bhutan's vision of development might be something that we could learn more about and see what meaning and relevance it may have for the world. And the reaction was amazing. Perhaps it was for the first time that so many leaders of the world knew about Bhutan's development vision. They went home and did their own part to understand it more and also to talk to more people. And then on, we've had several international conferences, some within Bhutan, some beyond. We had the second conference on gross national happiness in Canada, the third one in Bangkok, and in Brazil. The third one actually happened in Brazil. And in Brazil, the government has gone to the extent of changing a certain provision of the constitution to make pursuit of happiness a basic human right. And in the SAARC countries, there are people think about alternative ways of developing the country. In the United Kingdom, for example, the former British Prime Minister David Cameron was looking for ways to look at progress through alternative perspectives. So was the former President of France, Nicolas Sarkozy, and elsewhere also. There's been quite a lot of interest. And then in 2012, His Excellency Ban Ki-moon, the then Honorable Secretary General of the United Nations Organization, invited Bhutan to host a high-level meeting at the UN headquarters in New York. And it was another unprecedented meeting called by a small country, to which came as many as 800 leaders from around the world, people from all sections, young people, youth volunteers, activists, philosophers, musicians, sports people, people of, from the film industry, economists, university professors, presidents, prime ministers, statesmen, diplomats, people from all walks of life came there to attend this high-level meeting at the UN headquarters in New York in 2012. And after that, the word spread even further. And as we know, 20th of March is today celebrated as the International Day of Happiness at the recommendation of the UN General Assembly. And Bhutan was involved in a very deep way in the drafting of this document, Agenda 2020. When the Millennium Development Goals, that program was ending 2015, the UN system decided that we must have another set of goals for the world. And of course, we have now the Agenda 2030. And we brought together His Majesty the King of Bhutan through an official communication, through a royal communication, in fact, appointed some very important thinkers, some of the Nobel laureates, people who had done a lot of work in terms of development thinking to help with the drafting of a submission to be made to the UN General Assembly. And some of the, in fact, quite a lot of the proposals that were made by that committee have been included in Agenda 2030. So this is in a way, in very brief, in my halting language, with all my limitations, a brief submission to all of you, this August gathering on Bhutan's development vision, otherwise called gross national happiness. I have to explain this one thing, that is that many people ask me and ask my colleagues, my fellow citizens, all right, in Bhutan you talk about gross national happiness. This is the birthplace of the idea of gross national happiness, which means everybody in Bhutan must be very happy. This is what people ask us. And very quickly I have to correct them. This is not true. Yes. In fact, when the happiness report comes out, Bhutan doesn't feature on top. It is other countries. Maybe the way to assess happiness may be different, could be different, but we are not on top. We wished to be on top, but the important thing is that just as we do not wish to compare our own status of development against GDP yardsticks, as important as they are. We would like a more holistic way to assess development, societal progress. In the same way, if we again go back to the same comparisons and see where we feature on the league table, we may be a little unfair to ourselves. But what we try and do is that we keep ourselves focused on our North Star. We need a North Star, as indeed all nations need a North Star. And as long as we are focused on the North Star, we may get there in 1 generation, we may get there in 2 generations, or in 3, or we may go somewhere close to that, or never at all, see. But we need a vision, see. And this is the vision that we share, see. With no directives to anybody, no advice to anybody. But certainly, we feel that this has served us well. And with variations here and there, this could also serve humanity. And this is our prayer. Once again, I would like to say what a great joy and an honor it's been for me, an ordinary educator from Bhutan, to be able to step onto the hallowed soil of your university and to be received with such warmth and love, and to have this wonderful audience. I would like to thank all of you and wish each one of you and your institutions, your families, and your country much peace, happiness, and prosperity. Terima kasih.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, with your permission, can we have a short question and answer session?
Oh, yes, please. Yes.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, take the opportunity to ask His Excellency. We have 2 microphones at the back. So, any questions? Or you need time to digest? All right, that's the lady who wants to ask.
This has been rather thin soup, so maybe not difficult to digest. So, please, if there's anybody who would like to ask a question, I'll be very happy to try and respond to those.
Hello, Assalamualaikum.
Hello.
My name is Junaidi. I'm from the Kuliah of Halal and Research. Basically, I'm from Sabah. So our main revenue in one of the state in Malaysia, basically. So our main revenue is actually tourism. So it has been increasing a lot. But the dark side of it is that now there's a problem of tourism pollution. So what I want to ask, Bhutan being the only country, as I know, the negative carbon country that we have in the world, how do you guys basically handle the tourism in your areas, in your country, in order to prevent the tourism pollution to actually increase?
Yes,
Yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the fact that we use tourism in the same breath as we think of or talk about pollution also tells a story, doesn't it? We would not associate tourism with pollution, but it seems we have come to a point where the two go together, and I see that it does happen. I was deeply pained to see a traffic jam on the way to Mount Everest a few months ago, a few weeks ago. In the same way, I feel that a lot of countries are going through some challenges, and actually Bhutan is already. Otherwise, we had very strict tourism policy. We would not have many visitors. And one of the ways to control visitors was to, of course, restrict the numbers in the first place and put a fairly high tariff per day, something like $250 per day. And for most people, at that point in time, they used to find it a bit high, and to others maybe a little prohibitive. So there would be fewer tourists. But it seems now many people are doing well around the world. I guess the middle class is also becoming bigger, and they have more money in their pockets. Now a lot of people are going on holidays, and they travel with their families. They want to have fun, and especially when there is a choice of destinations in the world, warmer, hot, temperate, cold, cool, so they go all over. See. And they feel that Bhutan is a choice for many. For a long time, we restricted very strictly, but now we have opened up a bit. Bhutan, in fact, we would like people to come and visit our country, experience our culture, but at the same time, our absorptive capacity is limited. It's a small country. We do not have the infrastructure to accommodate a lot of visitors. And many of our sacred places were off bounds, off limits, out of bounds, off limits. But now we have become more liberal. However, we feel that we are already touching a mark that could be the maximums. So we have to think about our own capacity. So we feel that the charm that is associated with Bhutan, many people associate Bhutan, they used to call Bhutan the last Shangri-La. Of course, it is not a Shangri-La. It's a real country with real people, flesh and blood. But there is still some charm, and we would like to keep it. So tourist inflow is broadened now. However, it will continue to be monitored. Thank you.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. With all my due respect to His Excellency, I've been admiring Bhutan with my development economics class and environment studies with your negative carbon and forest cover country. So I have a question, but a background information. In Malaysia, last year, our World Happiness Index, we are ranked 30th, but this year we are ranked 80th. So a big drop from 30 to 80, and currently in Malaysia, in 100, 3 in 100 will suffer from depression. So my question is, how can we, from just a humble university, we can adopt this GNH in ourselves first, in our circle of friends, and in our universities? Because I understand that GNH in Bhutan is started from political will and strong leadership. But as in Malaysia, maybe we don't have that yet, but maybe we can start from ourselves and our community in IIUM. So I would like to help to listen to your advice. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm the least qualified person for any advice, to give any advice. But all I can say is that I find this university a happy university. As I came in, as I came in, this university more than reflected all the elements of my green school. Yes. These are there everywhere. The wall is a big textbook. The wall is an epic. Every wall is an epic. This is a book of, every wall is a book of knowledge, a book of wisdom. And the fact that you are located here, I'm amazed to see that you have over 600 acres of the sacred land of Malaysia, on which stands this temple of learning called the International Islamic University of Malaysia. How many universities would have this blessing? And you look around, all over, it is so green. Your mind can travel as far as the last horizon. And you have tremendous facilities here. And I feel that this place is already a happy place. That was the first impression I received. I'm sure even if I stay here longer, I'll not change my mind, or my impressions. Having said this, you know, His Majesty the King Bhutan, articulated this big vision of holistic development called gross national happiness. And it was up to the people of Bhutan, the government, the civil servants, the individual citizens, young boys and girls, to receive this message and make it our own, do our part. Yes. What do I do with that vision? Do I only listen to it and forget about it? Or do I make that vision my own? That was our North Star. I have to make that North Star my North Stars. Then there's an alignment of the North Stars, my individual North Star, in alignment with them, or aligned with them, my country's North Star. So as individuals, I believe it's important to ask questions. But I also believe that this is something that I'm sure there are some young people here. I'm sure all are young, right? Sorry, yes, all are young. So this is my belief as an educator. As an educator, it is not through training, but through my beliefs and my convictions and my philosophy. I believe that even though there are problems in the world, there are challenges in the world, it is still a good world. It is still a good world. It is still a good world. In life, there is bitterness. There are disappointments. There are failures and frustrations. But this life is still beautiful. It is still a beautiful life. It is still precious. We have to attune ourselves to some of the beautiful things that are there outside in the world, in our communities. Very often we don't see the rainbow. We don't see the stars in the sky. We don't see the flowers in bloom in our gardens, the chirping of the birds. We don't hear the sounds. We don't smell the fragrance. We don't touch enough. We don't hear enough. We don't see enough. We don't feel enough. That's why very often we feel that the world out there may not be very friendly with me. But I couldn't get a good name. But let me tell you, the moment you go out from this hall, the first person that you meet will be a good person. The moment you go out to the town, the first person you meet will be a good person. And there are so many good persons in the world. This world is a good place. And life is beautiful. Life is precious. Please don't waste it on depressions, on failures. We make it. We make it. I would like to wish you the very best. This is not so bad, right? And life is so precious. In Dzangkha, my national language, we call human life Milu Rinpoche. Milu Rinpoche. Precious human life. Precious human life. And we live only so long, and not longer. And within the time that we live, we have to celebrate it. We have to celebrate this life. Despite the problems, despite the challenges, despite the bitterness, with all these challenges, with all these imperfections, the world is still a good place, and life is still beautiful. And mind you, young people, you are here, maybe in your late teens, or some of you in even early teens, or early 20s. Your world is just opening up. The circumference of your universe, the circumference of your universe is expanding, is growing. Mine is contracting, yours is not. You have to celebrate your growth. You have to celebrate your development, your life, the promise of your life. Imagine such a beautiful temple of learning, and you and I coming here, not being able to celebrate the gifts that are here, not able to celebrate the gifts which are in Malaysia, and in the world, and in life. That will be sad. Sorry, it's a long answer to a short question. Yes.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It was a great pleasure to meet you yesterday night also.
Ah, yes, indeed.
Yeah, yes. Thank you. So I am a PhD student of Islamic finance. I followed the history you spoke about the happiness. You know, I'm coming from Dubai. They have a happiness minister, a formal, yes, it's a ministry is there. There's a happiness minister, and government is taking care of people very well. But including Dubai and including the world, I think through this history, which you said that, you said that ministers and countries were meeting to find the means for the happiness. I think on the opposite, the means for the depression is the interest-based financial system, which we are, you know, in most of the countries, we have no way to go out of it. Parents, when they have family, start family, they have to go through debt. Then student life is full of debt and interest-based debt, which is compounding interest. It never finished. So, and ongoing all your financing. So at any occasion, this was discussed that can we have a financial system which is more justice and social wise. It's not based on interest, which makes the capital will get more richer and the people who are poor will get more deprived. So this is a very fundamental requirement for human being. In Islam, it's very clear. It's one part of divine. Interest is haram. It's not allowed, not permissible, forbidden. So I would like your input if this was ever discussed, or if this should be part of the discussions that the interest system of financial system of interest should be revised so that, you know, we also avoid the major crisis which sometimes, you know, take happiness of full nation. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you so much indeed. Good luck with your studies. I think I must confess I'm not qualified to respond to this question because I think this has got to be dealt with by experts, and I'm sure there are a lot of experts to deal with this. But in this forum, I do not think specific issues like these were discussed, because these are, you know, this was a kind of a very special retreat looking at big global issues and the way forward. It is a kind of a vision for the future. But these are realities that we cannot shy away from. These are things that actually affect people. And I hope that there will be fora, there will be opportunities for world leaders. But I'm very sure that, in different meetings, conferences, these would be discussed, because these are things that are so important for so many people. These are real issues. And governments, institutions would have certainly discussed these. If there is no answer presented at the moment, or solution presented at the moment, that may be a different matter. But this is something that is too important to be ignored or skipped. However, as I was saying earlier on, it depends upon how much the country, the national government, the state governments can do. In Bhutan, as I said, promotion of good governance is one of the important pillars of gross national happiness. So the government has to know which section, which pocket of the country needs more support, which sections of the population. In our case, it's a lot easier because we are a very small country, very small population, not even 1 million. And I'm sure here in a small town, there'll be far, far more than that. So we can address things a lot more easily. Having said that, we have not achieved all our aspirations. We're still struggling. We are a developing country still. But given our size, we have done better in several social fields. For example, health and education, we have done quite a good job. But Bhutan is an agricultural country, and we have to do a lot more in agriculture and expand our production base as well. So this, I fully sympathize with this issue because I've spent my life with young people, with children, boys and girls, young men and women. Over 35 years of my life, I've spent with young people. I know what they go through. I know what challenges they have, the pains, the bitterness, the failures, but at the same time, the goodness that they have, the goodness, the idealism that they carry, the dreams and the hopes that they have. So I look at those more than the challenges. And where I have been able to address them, I've done that, but there are problems that need combined, concerted, and conscious efforts. It's very kind of you to highlight this issue. Thank you, sir.
One. Okay, just two last questions. After this, it will be Tan Sri's turn.
Good
Yes,
afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Your Excellency. My name is Jessie. I come from the Tree of Life Academy. I work specifically with adults and children on health, and we focus on that relation to happiness. One of the things that we face in the millennial coming into the organization and them into having family life, instant gratification is something that they expect. Self-victimization is also very common. Greed is the third key things that I see facing the new generations coming into the working life as well into family life. In your many history as a educationist, what have you actually introduced in Bhutan that helped the new generation to address some of these challenges that they faced? And maybe we could learn a lot from that. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much indeed. Thank you. Bhutan remained in what we call self-imposed isolation for many centuries. And it was only about the middle of the last century that our third king started opening Bhutan up and introducing it to the world outside. And in the early 1960s only, we started developing our 5-year plans. So the history of modern development in Bhutan is fairly new, even though the country as a whole has an ancient history. And after we started opening up and moving forward, the pace has been very rapid. And we have introduced an education system that ensures basic education, that's 11 years of compulsory schooling for everybody, all children. And beyond that, it's merit-based, right up to the university and beyond. And as a country, even though we are a deeply spiritual, inward-looking, reflective culture, after we started opening up, we have not been averse to influences that come from the discoveries, the innovations, the enterprise of the human race. We have benefited a lot from the knowledge and the advancements that our human race has brought about around the world. And in the more recent years, it is the advent of information technology. And the information technology wave has come in very fast. and I must say very aggressively. So it's already impacting our culture. It's already impacting our society. But we also have some of these cultural safeguards, religious, spiritual safeguards. As I was presenting earlier on, we have the chief abbot, head of the religious spiritual order, who travels around the country throughout the year, conducts big prayer meetings and discourses, and a large number of our young people come to these meetings. And we also have a good number of religious festivals, social events that we celebrate together. And I can see that a lot of our young people participate together with their parents in these. I was talking about cultural vitality. And His Majesty the King travels around the country, meets young people, speaks with them, and spends a lot of time with them. And of course, the education ministry. We have the green school, some of the elements, particularly mindfulness that our teachers do throughout. In fact, we begin with a morning assembly. And the morning assembly is a very solemn event. And when the teachers go inside, many of them would begin with a little meditation or mindfulness exercise. So we do not have a structured program as such, but we have all these interventions with which we try to help our young people. But there are still some whom sometimes it's difficult to reach out to. It is a challenge. It is becoming a challenge. And I can fully understand what you mean. Self-victimization. Yes, indeed. And this question that you asked earlier on. And yes, in my travels around the country, I've seen people. And the first lesson in my life, the first thing I share, I'm a teacher myself. As a teacher, for a teacher, of course, there are so many things we have to do. There's the syllabus. There's the curriculum that we need to cover. And we have to report to the government, to the ministry. But as a teacher, the first principle of education is respect for life, respect for the sanctity of life. This is such a precious gift we have, this life. I said precious human life. We may achieve everything in our life, but if we do not care for our life, if we do not cultivate these gifts that we are blessed with, if these gifts do not flourish in us, this will be such a waste. We are the human of the species, the most highly evolved of all the species, human beings, rational beings, Homo sapiens, supposed to be more evolved and better off compared to all the other species. And how do we behave? And I think of the mothers, I think of the families, the brothers, the sisters, the uncles and aunts. And yourself, when we were born, with just a small little lump of flesh, just a little lump of flesh, we could have so easily died and not seen this world if it was not for the love and the care and the affection that we received first from our mothers, then our parents, then siblings, brothers, sisters. Then when we went to college, school, how many people were there to look after us, to care for us, to make us succeed in life? There are so many people who want us to succeed in a life. And if young people don't understand that there are other people behind them, for them, who care for them, who look after their welfare, and they can do anything with their life, that is wrong. So I think we have to be at times very firm. You cannot do it. It's a crime, especially if they harm themselves. So this will be something that is not only harmful, but sinful, to do any harm to life. How many people, and how many gifts do we have? Do we allow this life to flourish? Does this life flourish? We have these wonderful gifts. We have the ability to see, the gift of hearing, the gift of touching, the gift of tasting and smelling. We know the world by using these gifts. Why don't we sharpen these gifts, celebrate these gifts, know the world, feel with the world, feel for the world? Young people, I think, have got to be a little more responsible, not only so much for others at the moment, but for themselves. We have to be accountable for what we do. See. We cannot waste this opportunity. Sorry, ma'am, it's a long answer. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay,
Are we done? Okay.
One last question from Tan Sri.
Excellency, my name is Shad Faruqi. I'm a law teacher.
Law.
I'm all with you when you call for development which must be holistic.
Yes.
I would agree with you that growth, for the sake of growth, is the ideology of the cancer cell. I think the most important things in life are not things, so we see eye to eye on that. However, at the same time, as a law teacher, it's our job to educate people about their rights, about justice. And sadly, when you talk about justice, you also mention examples of injustice. There are people who are in slavery, women who are exploited, workers who are exploited, consumers who are made use of. So if we brief them on their rights, on a vision of justice, in a way you are raising discontent. So what's your opinion on this? Some people are quite satisfied with what they have. Even though they are exploited, they are satisfied because they count their blessings, and that's good. Instead of their miseries, they count their blessings. So what should we as human rights advocates, as teachers do when we teach them about rights? In a way, we are teaching them to be a little bit discontented with their present position and to seek a better future. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I hope I haven't done anything illegal. Yes, this morning, so thank you. I do not see these things as contradictory to each other, as opposed to each other. It is not actually prodding them at the level of discontentment, but actually inviting them to see things whole, to see things complete, and see as to how that particular situation of injustice or violation of rights would have come about. So I think when people see that there are causes and effects, I would think that they would take a much broader view, and that may not lead them to discontentment or bitterness, but they may be more satisfied. But for me, not being a law person, I would not know so much about rights. But as a teacher, I'm more interested in what is right. And if we do what is right, rights will already be taken care of. So I think the broader question would be broadening the space for what is right, what is correct, what is truthful. And I'm sure the university has so much authority in broadening that space for goodness, for right. So outside the university, we do not have to talk about rights. So I make a distinction between right and rights, and not so much about people being reminded of their rights and that leading to discontentment. And yes, yeah, long ago when I was yes, a student of Plato. Yes, just talking about, he was, yeah, I'm not qualified to talk about Plato, but from what I read, I thought he was more interested in justice as being the most fundamental rule of operation in the society at all levels. And if that is established, I'm sure question of rights will not arise because things are already right. They're done the right ways, the correct way, the just ways. I don't think this is an answer, Professor, to your question, but I feel this is what I feel about some of these things. Sorry, Barry, just some. So
Okay, I'm going to use my privilege as a rector to ask a question. I must ask this question because I think you are too humble to mention it now. Lest all of us think that happiness will fly in tomorrow without doing very much. I learned when I was in Bhutan. There were volunteers, perhaps, who walked 5 days and 5 nights to a school and to establish a school. I later learned that you yourself, as a minister, walked 7 days and 7 nights to the remotest part of Bhutan to visit and to also encourage students to learn and to go through education. Now tell us that education and happiness also need sacrifice. How do you put this in the context of your GNH?
yes, thank you so much. As somebody who I have known longer than anybody else here in the hall, I thought you would be kinder to me and not ask a question. Yes, Venerable Tansri. Anyway, I have to begin with a story. I think we have no patience for a story now, it's lunchtime. So, but is that okay if I could share a little story? I visited a school, I was still in the ministry then, and I used to travel extensively around the country, including traveling to a school 7 days walk away from the headquarters. I thought I had to go there to celebrate the International Literacy Day with the children of the remotest school in the country that involved a walk of 7 days. 2 days ago was the International Literacy Day, 8th September. That's the International Literacy Day. It's about literacy, education, empowerment. So these children are very special. Nobody goes there. People they don't see anybody else. It's so far to go. It's so difficult to go. And one can understand why people can't go there, see, when you really walk there. You cross mountain passes, 16,000 plus feet above sea levels, 17,000 plus feet above sea levels. This is where our children are, see. And as the education minister, I had to go there, see, to meet the children and our teachers. But this is not the story, see. This is another, more hopeful story, see. I was in a school in the morning, and all our schools have morning assemblies. So they asked me to attend the morning assembly and speak to the children, which I did. And after my little talk to the children, I had some time, so I asked them, I told them, if they had any question, they could ask me, and I'd be very happy to respond to those. So there was a little child. They stand in the rows, and she stepped outside the line, out of the line. Okay. Am I supposed to stop? No? Okay. So this child, class 4, she must be about 8 years old, class 4 child, or maybe 9 years old. Maybe 10, yes, class 4. So she stepped aside and asked me, what does a minister do? What does a minister do? This was the most beautiful question I ever heard from a child, or from anybody's. What does a minister do? And all the teachers were around, and the other students, they're looking at me, how would I answer this question? Yes, so. But luckily for me, I didn't have to make much efforts. I remembered the Latin root of the word minister. It comes from The Latin root of the word minister is ministrare, ministrare. And minister means to serve, to serve. So I told this child, as a minister, I have to serve you. I have to serve my teachers. I have to serve the parents. I have to serve the citizens. This is what my role is as a public person, as a public servant. My job, my role as a minister is to serve you. And yes, I think the child quite appreciated that. I was there to serve them. Because this is what we do all the time. We are there to serve. Yes. And I make a distinction between role and soul that Professor Tansri talked about in the morning, Tansri Zul. We all have a role, but every role has a soul. And I think that I have to operate. I don't succeed always, but at least try and operate from a level that is as close as possible to the role. I make many mistakes, but I think every role, wherever we are, including on the farm or in the kitchens or cleaning the road, we have a role. And how well we do that role, perform that role, depends upon us. So that is what I thought I owed to the children that I was responsible for. Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. Terima kasih. Thank you so much indeed. Thank you so much. Thank you.